on time if we can. I'd like to call the meeting to order and request a roll call, please.
Mr. Newmoff?
Here.
Ms. Kalinowski is absent. Mr. Darrow?
I'm here.
Vice President McClellan is absent. Ms. Kohler?
I'm here as well. Thank you very much. Would you all please stand and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance, please?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very, very much. And I'd like to welcome everyone to the March 28th, 2016 regular meeting of the Board of Education. Our ranks on the board are somewhat diminished this evening. Unfortunately, Mrs. Kalinowski has a virus that none of us would like to get. And I'm expecting Mr. McClellan at any time. So why don't we just go ahead and tackle the first item on the agenda, and that is the approval of the board minutes for the February 1st, 2016 special board meeting, the February 8th, 2016 board work session, the February 19th, 2016 board retreat, and the February 22nd, 2016 regular board meeting. May I have a motion, please?
So moved. Second.
Thank you very much. Are there any additions or corrections to the agenda this evening?
No.
We've all had a chance to read and review these, and they also look to be in order to me. So may we have a roll call vote, please?
Mr. Darrow?
Yes.
Mr. Newmoff?
Yes.
President Kohler?
Yes, and that motion carries. Now, are there any additions to the agenda this evening? Dr. Dominy?
No.
No? Okay. So with that being said, could I please have a motion to approve the agenda as written?
So moved.
Thank you. Thank you very much. May I have a roll call, please?
Mr. Newmoff?
Yes.
Mr. Darrow?
Yes.
President Kohler?
Yes, and that motion carries. We've moved into now communication to the board, and I'd like to invite Superintendent Dominy to update us all with some of the many, many recognitions and celebrations that are occurring in the district.
Thank you, President Kohler. Ms. Jenkins just instructed me that our Auditor of State representative is not here. Mr. Kraft, are you here? Okay, so we will table that and come back to that. That is yet again another award of outstanding practices in accounting being awarded to Ms. Jenkins in our financial department, the Auditor of State Award with distinction, and we will return to Mr. Kraft for the presentation of that when he arrives. But without further ado, it's my pleasure to have the opportunity to recognize what an extraordinary swim and dive season our students had this year. The list goes on and on. Accolades for our students, a state champion, an award-winning coach, and so we'll have Mr. Carter come and get us started with celebrating all of these accomplishments this evening.
Good evening, Dr. Dominy, and board president and board members. Thank you for having me here today just to recognize our outstanding student athletes. I always say there's 7 A's that make for a successful school, and one of those A's is athletics, because it gives students the opportunity to showcase their talents, but also to build community and express themselves in a much more performance-based manner. So athletics is a major part of high school success, and the 2 teams we're recognizing here today demonstrate that. So first I want to call up assistant basketball coach Jerry Tackett. Sam Davis is on vacation in Florida, So Jerry Tackett is going to speak about the boys basketball team, and then following Mr. Tackett will be Coach Dave Wharton, who coached the championship swim team, but also wanted to recognize Coach Wharton for being inducted into the Pennsylvania Athletic Hall of Fame. I think it was over the last week. So if we can just give him a round of applause for that huge accomplishment. Mr. Tackett.
Coach Tackett, while you're coming to the podium, my apologies for not mentioning boys basketball in my intro.
I was hiding in the corner.
Great accomplishments. Yes,
It's okay.
no, not at all.
First off, I wanted to thank the board for recognizing our program this year, and this is the 5th of the past 6 OCC championships that we've won. We've had a lot of success with our basketball opportunities. Most of the boys are in other sports, or they're out of town still. I do have one of them. He just walked in, Tommy McDonald here. We had 7 seniors, which is a unique experience for us. It's a lot of seniors to have on the program. We graduated every player on our varsity team last year that started. So we came back with an entirely new starting team. We were predicted to finish 4th in the league. Instead, we won the league. We won the sectionals also. Just an outstanding bunch of young men. They're something that represents our community so well. Joey Rowling was selected as a District 10 All-Star. He is a fantastic representation of what we do as a program. He's good academically as well as athletically. I don't know if you all had a chance to see. He was on ESPN. Which was amazing. He had a miracle shot to help us win a game not too late in the season. So just a fantastic year for us, and just want to thank the board for recognizing us. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for having us in. I appreciate it. Wanted to start off by thanking everybody for all of their support, the swim team and the divers. Everybody really appreciates all the support that we do. I just wanted the swimmers, I know you're on a long agenda, so it's not going to take a long time, but I wanted you to see. I'm just going to cover the stats on a real high note. The girls team was OCC champions for the Capital League. Undefeated dual meet season. They broke 7 records this year, which was unbelievable, but they broke them 15 times. They kept re-breaking them. They were first at the sectional meet districts. They were second runner-up and 13th at the state meet for the state of Ohio. We had 12 All-Ohio certificates, which means they placed in the top 16 in the state. And, of course, our state champion, Nikki Waters, in diving. So girls had a fantastic year. On the boys' side, they, too, were OCC champions, undefeated dual meet season. 2 records that were broken 4 times. First at the sectional meet, 6th at the district meet, and we're 33rd in the state of Ohio as a team. So as a team, we had an unbelievable year, very dedicated, and even beyond the high school season, a lot of them went on to compete at the junior nationals at a national competition for 18 and unders. So very proud of the efforts that they've done.
Thank you. Coach, if you would wait for just a second so we can also recognize Coach Wharton is very modestly not aware that he received the Ohio District Girls, Central District Girls Swimming Coach of the Year.
She's actually practicing because she's competing at the National Super Championship this coming weekend. So I'll share that.
These are for all of the rest of your state placing plans.
Thank you.
Are there any parents of any of our athletes who are here this evening? Well then please stand up and let's give you a round of applause. I know that you are integral to the success. I had a very short-lived career as the parent of a swimmer, and it turned out she was more of a mathlete than an athlete, but I do understand the dedication and the hours that you spend at meets watching things that seem to fly by before you even know they've started. And also the work that's involved as a family to support your athletes at practice and making sure they get the rest and the nutrition and the support with their academic work that they all need. So thank you so much for your partnership. So,
Congratulations. We will now move back to the Auditor of State Award and turn it over to Mr. Tim Kraft.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I apologize for being late. My GPS took me about 3 buildings over that way. By the time I found out where I was supposed to go and moved over here. So I apologize for being late. But it's my honor. This seems to be becoming like a yearly tradition for me to come and give Rebecca Jenkins and her staff this award. What we're presenting tonight is the highest award the Auditor of State's office gives out. To win the Auditor of State Award with distinction is given those entities that file an annual CAFR, a timely financial report in accordance with the GAAP, as well as receive a clean audit report. Clean audit report means your financial audits are not getting finding for recovery, material citations, material weaknesses, single deficiencies, single audit findings, or any questionable costs. That's all the auditor talk. It also goes, there's actually more detail to this than just what I read. But what I like to talk about is how hard this award is to earn. The Auditor of State's audits over 5,800 public entities, to the smallest township in Vinton County to The Ohio State University. They are all audited by the Auditor of State's audit. Out of those 5,800 public entities throughout the entire state, roughly 5% of them receive this award. And that's to say that you guys are operating in the 95th percentile as far as the Auditor of State's office is concerned. And to win it year in and year out, like Rebecca and her staff has done, is an amazing commitment and definitely the hard work of them. So thank you. And with that, I will present the award to Rebecca Jenkins.
And on behalf of the board, I'd just like to thank you very much for coming and sharing this award with Ms. Jenkins and her staff, and extend our heartiest congratulations to you once again.
Thank you.
I think that we are just extremely proud to have a person of your caliber at the helm, and we know just how difficult this award is to achieve, particularly year after year after year. So thank you very much.
Thank you. I do have to say, though, it is, it's not just me alone. It's the staff. It's the district that, really follow all of the rules as best they can. But they really do a great job. The staff in our office does a fantastic job tracking everything and making sure we stay on plan, and then compiling the CAFR is a huge job. So I don't do it alone. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'll see you next year.
No pressure. That concludes recognitions, and I will move to superintendent's report. In your folders, you have a summary document from me regarding the two main topics that we're going to visit this evening in the superintendent's report. The first being our staffing plan. As we've talked repeatedly over the last few months and planned for the next step in beginning to very incrementally add additional positions to start addressing some of the areas of most critical need. We did include approximately 13 new certified staffing positions for the coming school year. Our administrative team has been working over the last few months to identify the highest areas of need for these positions, and we've begun with the recommendation of 11 of those positions, knowing that we will need to be prepared for some flexibility in the remaining 2. Those positions are 3 in special education, One is a psychologist position that is required for the district to provide for Marburn Academy when the school opens here next year. And the second is another special education unit for autism and cross-categorical student needs. And then the third are for a mental health specialist. The mental health specialists that serve students on IEP are hired through the ESC. And this person will be able to consult on at-risk needs as they are available, but their primary assignment will be students on IEP. The next four positions are positions in elementary class size reduction. Our principals have identified grades K1, 4, and 5. Although we will continue to watch enrollment, we are following at this point in time the updated enrollment projection for that recommendation. At the high school level, Mr. Carter and Mr. Gellert have been both assessing current class sizes as well as watching course enrollments for the coming school year. Students have completed their registrations for next year's courses, and their recommendation is for a high school social studies position for next year. At middle school, the two positions again targeted on extremely high class size for adjustment are middle school science and middle school art. And then finally, as we continue to review the needs of dramatic reductions, one of the areas that was hardest hit was our gifted program. And after much discussion, we believe that the very first next step is to reinstate an elementary gifted position. It will be targeted in serving students in grades 4 and 5. This will allow us to provide some more direct service to students primarily in the classroom and primarily students that are superior cognitive. As the board knows, and we can certainly discuss in greater detail, our Vanderbilt study on best practices in gifted. We provide a scaffolded type of service array, which includes looking at both specific academic talent gifted students and superior cognitive gifted students. In the reductions, all direct service was eliminated, we believe, and would fit with our Vanderbilt study that the most significant area to begin some of that reinstatement is to superior cognitive students and is at the elementary level. The way that we're addressing the reductions of gifted services in middle school is through expanded accelerated course offerings. And that is the way that we are providing opportunities for gifted students at the middle school. The second area that I wanted to follow up with you about that we have talked about over the last few weeks and preparing for is that in the spring is when we renew administrative contracts that are up for renewal. I've provided you the list of administrators whose contracts are up for renewal, and I will be recommending these individuals for action on 2-year contract renewals at the April 25th board meeting. So wanted to provide, again, plenty of notice regarding that as I've done in providing you the contract templates for the different levels of position so that you can begin to review the structure of administrative hire and compensation. We'll put this on as a discussion topic for your April 11th work session, where we can review again those administrative contracts by level. As you know from the templates you received, administrators, assistant directors and assistant principals have one type of contract, principals and directors another. We are recommending then when we have chief or assistant superintendent level contracts as well. So you've seen those templates, and we'll continue to discuss that throughout the month of April leading up to that action. The third, along with administrative contracts, I did want to share after extended conversation with each of you individually that we are moving forward also with a recommendation to reinstate the curriculum director position for next year. That's one of the staffing recommendations in administration, as has been a high school assistant principal that was already shared with you in the 5-year forecast. We also want to express our sincere appreciation to Mrs. Gonda for her extraordinary work this year with Mrs. Raymond in the interim. When Mrs. Javanka announced her resignation in July, right before the start of the school year, Mrs. Gonda and Mrs. Raymond teamed up to make sure that our middle school this year had the leadership that needed to persevere through some changes and restructuring, to continue to provide the great education and social emotional supports for our kids that they provide every day. And they've done an outstanding job, and we're grateful for that help in the interim. As we do in our practice, we always, when we have a principal opening, we post that position and encourage internal applicants like Mrs. Gonda to apply. And we will be posting the middle school position, principal position this week. And of course, you see Mrs. Gonda's name on your recommendation list for renewal in her assistant principal contract. She's been a strong leader in our district for many years, and we're grateful that she's here serving the kids and teachers and families of our district. So the final note that I wanted to share this evening is related to a new committee that you have heard about, we've shared about in previous emails, is a collaboration with our board president and vice president, our plea president and vice president, and our administrative superintendent and treasurer team to begin a series of collaborative monthly dialogues, not for the specific purpose of achieving any specific topic or goal or action or task, but to foster a collaborative dialogue on an ongoing basis. And that work begins this week. So thankful to everyone for wanting to move forward to keep those collaborative relationships strong at this time. Those are three of the major topics that I have for you. Along with the 5-year forecast, I do want to encourage the board to continue to, I know you think about this all the time, continue to consider as you prepare for the revision or the updating of the 5-year forecast, in addition to these staffing recommendations, what other things would you ask us to consider for revision to the 5-year forecast? And this would be the time for the board to discuss, for instance, any changes to transportation for the coming year and any changes to pay to participate, including a reduction of the fees and or including a family cap. We've heard, and the board has had a great deal of conversation about this over the past year or more. And as you know, from reviewing the 5-year forecast, and Ms. Jenkins provided some additional just reminders and updates for me today. Our 5-year forecast cash balance continues to be positive with the reductions and the restructuring that we've done. If the board should consider, for instance, a reduction of $100 in the athletic fee and or family cap, the estimated cost of that annually is likely to be $175,000 to $200,000, and that would reduce your cash balance by the 5th year of the forecast to approximately $1.4 million. That's just one estimate of modeling. Ms. Jenkins and I continue to talk, and as the board considers what revisions you would like to be discussed and considered, we would appreciate having those conversations with you so that we can begin to model and consider those financial impacts of those suggestions or topics that you may want to discuss.
Just as a reminder, the 5-year forecast has to be revised and submitted to the Department of Education between April 1 and May 31. So that's our window to revise. Obviously, you can revise forecast at any time and resubmit, but that's a mandatory filing.
And just for a point of clarification, the recommended staffing additions are built into, they're already built into this. So
Yes, right. So any change would be anything beyond the staffing that had
Right.
already been built in. So there are 13 FTE for certified staff in fiscal 17. There is an additional FTE for certified staff for Marburn. There is one administrator in the forecast at this point. So the curriculum administrator would be in addition to that. And then there are 6 classified staff that are built in. Those have not been identified. If they aren't needed, they wouldn't be filled. So anything beyond those would change the forecast. The pay to participate, if there is any change to that, would change the forecast.
And let me clarify, I appreciate Mrs. Jenkins for pointing this out, that the curriculum director is not expected to be more than approximately a $20,000 increase and can be absorbed within the certified staffing budget. We used outsourced consulting services this year to address the needs of that department. So there were still realized costs in order to keep up with the work generated by that department. So the differential between returning to a staff person and moving away from that model will have about a $20,000 estimated increased cost that will be able to be absorbed within the certified staffing budget.
So that $20,000 is already in the certified staffing budget?
No, I'm saying that we are making a commitment that within, as I shared in the email update, the FTEs are used to create a dollar amount budget and were created to help us identify where we wanted to begin with reductions. But from here on out, we manage that to the dollars and what do we need to achieve. And so therefore, what I'm saying is within that dollar amount that is already in your 5-year forecast, we can also achieve that within this structure.
Can you kind of outline the timeline that we're going to be following as we work our way through this process?
Sure. Typically what we've done is talk with the finance committee. That'll be April 18th to go over the things that are in the forecast, talk about, we would bring up the pay to participate again. We have talked with that group several times about that. Bring that up again, implement anything, any of the suggestions from that group that we can do or that we believe the board would be interested in. Then in the first, typically in the first meeting, board meeting in May, which is a work session, we would go through the 5-year forecast. I would go through any changes that are made, if any. You would need to get back with me unless you have information or additions or deductions that you would like implemented as a board in the forecast. The sooner I get those, the better. And then we would talk through that as well. And then at the second board meeting in May is when the board typically takes action to approve that forecast so that I can have that filed in time to meet that deadline.
Are there any questions about?
I was going to say, Dr. Dominy, thanks for the update on the staffing plan. Anything focused on improving academic performance, I think is fantastic. You mentioned, Becky, the 6 classified staff. Is there a recommendation at this point relative to classified staff?
What I can share on the classified recommendation is a few things that are part of our estimate, but that still is under review. The first would be custodial maintenance. We need to, one of those classified positions will be a custodial maintenance position for the new building. At least 2 of the additional classified are set aside and likely to be special ed educational assistants. Those are required by individual education plan, and we often cannot finalize those until we're into the summer months. And we see both the needs of students demonstrated in their IEPs and any move-in students and what the needs of their IEPs might be. So that's 3 of the 6. Part of the ongoing discussion that the board needs to have related to transportation could also affect whether or not bus drivers are needed as part of that classified FTE, and that's a conversation that Michael and I have continued to have. We're not ready to finalize that part of the recommendation at this time, and so those are the initial plans in the classified area.
Thank you.
We also usually keep a couple of those as unidentified, if you will, throughout the year because of some of the special ed needs. So where we can fill with a classified position rather than the certified position, we use those as well.
Do you think that with Marburn Academy opening, does it have the opening of that particular school, will that have any additional impact beyond what we're seeing in terms of the psychologist that we are going to need to provide to them, either in terms of additional expenses or in the possibility that we might lose some students?
Well, I think practically that we would expect that participation by New Albany students in Marburn may in fact go up with the close proximity of the campus right nearby. I will invite Ms. Saunders up to the podium she's been working with Marburn. We have been, I met with the headmaster, Jamie Williamson, and since that time, I've introduced Sheila to the staff there, and she's been working to create our plan so that we're prepared to collaborate with them. She's been attending meetings with their psychology department, and so she can give the best detailed answer to that.
Sure. As far as our responsibility as a district, it is the psychological services or the evaluation of the students. We wouldn't be responsible for writing IEPs for those kids unless they were New Albany students. So anyone attending from other districts would be responsible for those. We've gone through the numbers. It's looking like there are about over 70 evaluations that are due next year. So it is a full-time position. We know that going in. We know that they won't take occupancy until about Christmas break or winter holiday. Excuse me. So with that planning in mind and moving forward, we're already having some of our New Albany parents saying, we know our child's evaluation is due. Since we're coming to New Albany, can the New Albany psychologist complete the evaluation? So we're going to start working with and making sure that those things can happen smoothly. And then in terms of numbers of students that attend there, like Dr. Dominy said, I would anticipate that our numbers, just because of the proximity and location of the building, will increase some. It does impact us in terms of if a child participates in the John Peterson, or most of them are John Peterson scholarship students. We do not bring in, and Ms. Jenkins can talk more financially about that than I can. We don't bring in the amount of money that we lose to a scholarship kiddo. So in terms of services provided, so that would impact us financially.
But at this point, I don't believe we have an estimate of the number of students that we expect to increase going to Marburn. We'll work with that throughout the summer, hopefully have a better idea.
Yes.
But that is a good basic financial talking point that we've often talked about in the past, that the per pupil funding that is received for students with disabilities does not equal the tuition amount that they would earn through their John Peterson scholarship that would then come from district funds when they transferred. So just to make sure that's clear for the board. And while you're at the podium, can you just give the board a quick understanding of the services and how we have prepared our services for dyslexic students here so that there's some similarity of access to the types of therapy and that type of thing?
Absolutely. We're working through, and actually the district before I even came had made the investment in sending a couple of teachers to become trained and certified OG, the Orton-Gillingham approach to reading, which is what Marburn is also known for, and a lot of people go for the Orton-Gillingham approach for dyslexia. So we have staff members that are trained here as well. We can provide the same services that Marburn can provide here on campus. I think we do a fantastic job and then some. So I think that that's, also parents understand that we do a good job here. They do not have, and what Marburn doesn't have to do is what happens at the IEP that's in place when a parent takes a scholarship, it no longer is in effect once they go to Marburn. So some of the related services that they may get here, like your occupational therapy and your physical therapy, they do not have to provide at Marburn. So that's something that we are able to provide here because that IEP is really no longer in existence once they take the scholarship. So does that help?
Thank you.
Yeah.
Appreciate it. Thank you. Any other questions?
In general, on the staffing plan, it's, I think it said 13 total.
There are 13 in the budget. Right now, there are 11 here
Okay.
on what we presented to you.
So while I certainly support making sure that we are taking steps to address class size issues and resolve those challenges, I still want to be able to see the overall picture, to understand how we're managing student-teacher ratio overall, and to see if there are other moves that can be taken among the staff to fill in high school social studies, for example, without necessarily adding an additional staff member. So there are still some questions I have in my mind, and that was just one example. There are still some questions I have to make sure that of the hundreds of total staff people, that our utilization of those overall is optimal. And if not, if we can fill in without having to increase headcount. So
I'm happy to continue to work with you on that. I would say that our use of staff by certification is optimized. What you would have to do in terms of finding another secondary licensed social studies teacher in order to lower high school social studies class size would be to raise class size somewhere else. So if there, let's say, for instance, there's a middle school social studies teacher that's also certified for high school. You could move that individual to high school, but thereby raise middle school class size because you had moved that individual to high school. So certainly as we're looking at the numbers and trying to create balance, we are working to optimize every existing staff member, but then identifying these in the areas where there isn't a staff member that, say, just has a low staff count and therefore could be retasked, I think is what you're suggesting. So I'm happy to provide those numbers in whatever way would be helpful to represent that.
okay.
Okay, thank you very much for those updates. Our next item on the agenda are board liaison reports. Are there?
I'm sorry, we're still on updates.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
And
Oh.
Ms. Carrie Ballard is here for plea.
No offense,
Hello.
Carrie.
Hi. No, that's okay. I would have been okay with being skipped.
Oh, I would have found you eventually.
The membership has 3 notes of staff recognition. Lisa Betts attended the annual Central States Conference on the teaching of foreign languages. That included some breakout sessions and a 3-hour workshop where she discussed teaching strategies to help students attain proficiency in L2 languages. 6th grade social studies students in Melissa Bean's class learned about ancient India and Hinduism as part of their religion and culture unit. And as part of that study, they had a local Hindu parent come in and talk about some traditions and henna, and they were able to apply that and had some students help do that. And then they shared some cultural stories. Shelly Cervantes, Lola Elmer, Elise Carez, and Leah Paulson, Sarah Sauter, and Kalia Schweitzer attended the McGraw-Hill workshop about supetizing numbers and strategies for teaching basic facts. It was presented by Gina Kling from Western Michigan University, and they were provided some materials and ideas that they can bring back to their classrooms. That was it.
That's great. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Carrie. And do we have anyone from OPSI here for the update? Seeing no one from OPSI? That concludes the superintendent items.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks so much. So let's go back to discussion items this evening, and we have 3 items listed. The first is board liaison reports, and I don't know if there are any this evening or not.
None.
Okay, well, that takes us then into the superintendent search. And I believe Mr. Darrow has an update for us.
I do, and we have a couple of guests as well. So the superintendent search process continues. We have been very public with our plans for the superintendent search. we engaged HYA to help us with that search process. As part of the search process, we have received applications, for a total of 4 applications for the position, 1 internal, 3 external. Of the external candidates, only 1 had a resume that rose to the level of serious consideration by us, and I conducted a telephone interview with that candidate, and we expect to have that candidate come in and meet with the board next week for a discussion, for a public interview, and we'll continue the process. We have continued to stay in contact with Michael Sawyers, who we continue to believe is a very strong internal candidate. And our commitment is to complete the process, to follow through on the process that we've announced, and to make a decision as quickly as possible in the context of assuring that we are complete with our process. So that's really where it stands. I'll turn it over to HYA. They have a number of reports. They have conducted the public survey, which had outstanding participation. I believe a total of 750 responses, which is outstanding public input. And they have collated that information along with a few other pieces. So I'll turn it over to Alan from HYA for now.
Great, thank you. Well, first of all, this is our first opportunity, Dave Estrop and I, to say thank you for allowing us to help you with this search. Tonight, we're bringing you a draft of the leadership profile based on the community input. As Mr. Darrow indicated, we had a huge response. This is a very, very high response rate. Not probably surprising for your community, but lots and lots of comments. We did this a little bit of a different way in terms of lots more open-ended comments that generated much reaction, which we provided to the board so that you can see all of them. The only thing we've deleted is individual names for personnel reasons. Tonight, we're here to do 2 things. First of all, we're providing a draft of our leadership profile report, which is designed to be the guiding force, if you will, for the remainder of the process. And then on the last page, we've drafted some desired characteristics. We'd like to get your input tonight, how well we've done, anything that you want to change, anything you want to add, anything you want to subtract, as well as anything we might have gotten wrong in the leadership profile. What we're giving you tonight is a draft. Our goal is, based on our discussion tonight, I'm hoping to turn this into a PDF, and we'll send you a final copy of the report then to publicize on your website and to your community and whatever, so that the people that took the time and the effort to communicate will see sort of what the general results of that are, et cetera. As we've discussed, this is an expedited search that we're moving fairly quickly, and that's why we did this through open-ended questions. We've quite honestly never quite done it this way before, but I think it worked out actually very, very well. And again, even though there was a short survey time period, your community responded, particularly parents. So those, I think, are the key issues. I was going to highlight, too, the wonderful response rate. Dave is going to take you, basically, Dave and I read all the comments about strengths of the district, the challenges and issues a new superintendent will need to face in this district, and we attempted to summarize those for you. And then I'm going to come back and talk to you a little bit about what we see in the survey. Basically, this survey, we have a national sample now of almost 30,000 participants across the nation who have taken the same survey around lists of characteristics. And I'd like to point out to you what's alike and what's different between the responses here and there. And then I'll spend a little bit of time with you on the last page, which is the draft of desired characteristics. So Dave is next, and he'll highlight the strengths. We all too often, I think, point right to the issues, but obviously there's great strengths in the district, and it was very consistent in terms of the parent responses in particular.
Thank you, Alan. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen of the board. It's good to be back and present to you. I'm going to be offering some comments based upon page 3 of the report that you received. As Alan mentioned, there are a lot of strengths in this district. And of the bulleted items, the first 2 were consistently reported across all 6 of the stakeholder groups. Virtually everyone who took the time to complete a questionnaire of any kind spoke to the exceptional and motivated students from strong families and the high-quality, dedicated teachers, staff, and administrators. There was strong support for the other 3, the excellent facilities that create a positive learning environment. And all I can say in this room is, wow, this is incredible. The focus on and expectation for academic excellence. And lastly, supportive, involved community that expects outstanding educational opportunities for students. There were other things mentioned ranging from the strong curriculum to communications to a number of areas, but the bulleted points are the thrust of the comments around the strengths of the district. Not unlike almost every school system, particularly in the state of Ohio, New Albany Plain Local School District does have some challenges. And those are highlighted in the last two paragraphs on page 3. Without a question, the biggest challenge for your new superintendent is going to be around finances and financial accountability. Without a question, this is a challenge for the district. And to make the issue more difficult, there seems to be a split within the community over whether the issue is too high of taxes or funds being mismanaged or failure to pass a levy. So this will clearly be a challenge for the next superintendent, is dealing with this whole financial issue. The second big issue that rises is mentioned in the last paragraph on page 3, and this is around the whole area of trust. That relates to the accountability issue, but I think it can be summarized in the last 2 sentences on that page. There were several pleas for the importance of a new superintendent being transparent and good at getting groups to work together. As one teacher expressed it, quote, "We need a climate change to get people to come together and focus on the common good." And I think that summarizes the 2 biggest challenges that you here in New Albany Plains face, are those 2 challenges: the financial situation and then the accountability and working together to resolve it. Are there any questions that I might answer? The report continues on the next page with several other issues that bubble to the top, but frankly, the 2 big bangers are the ones I just discussed. Questions? If not, I'll turn it back to Alan.
Thanks, Dave. In looking at the survey results, I wanted to point out a couple of things to you. I've had the benefit of been working now several years with Hazard Young and Attia, so I've worked in all kinds of districts, very large districts, very small districts, very diverse districts, very high achieving districts. So I thought I'd offer, for whatever it's worth, my perceptions of what's unique about this school district as resulted in the survey. The top 5 areas are highlighted there for those people in the audience. The first one was around managing long-term financial health of the district. Positive professional climate of mutual trust. A new superintendent needs to listen to and effectively represent the interests and concerns of everyone, all the stakeholders in this community. Align budgets, plans, and operational procedures, and then recruit and retain effective personnel. The one thing that's a little unusual is, or that's a little different about this, is that, as you know, the survey was constructed, as we mentioned, the survey was constructed around the research for effective superintendents. And at the bottom of page 8 in particular is the little key, the 5 areas: vision and values, instructional leadership, community engagement, community and collaboration, and management. And the thing that's somewhat interesting here is that while all of the 5 areas are represented in like the top 10 for this school district, management is 3 of the 5 issues. That's not something that you generally see. And it sort of led me to conclude that superintendent experience would be particularly important in this district, someone, or maybe treasurer financial experience, but certainly someone that is very comfortable in the financial and management realm would be particularly important in my view in this district. A fairly long list on page 6. The other thing that we do is that we look at all the stakeholder groups. The survey, people self-identified as either administrators, community members, parents, support staff, students, or teachers. We had a very good sample of actually all those groups, so there was no group that was terribly underrepresented. But then one of the things our statistical department does is identify where there's a statistical difference between the responses of a group on one item versus another item. And it's a fairly long list on page 6, but I thought I'd combine that with something else. If you turn to page 7, I sort of bring those two thoughts together in one comment. The other thing that I mentioned to you a moment ago is that we do have national benchmark data for HYA for all the school systems we work with. We've been doing this same survey now for, I think, 4 or 5 years. And so we literally work across the nation with some, including some very, very large school districts, Los Angeles Unified, Houston, et cetera. And so we provide in the second column the national HYA benchmark. So in other words, in all our databases, how often was this item chosen, et cetera. And then in your school system, in the all column, how often it was chosen here. So the first thing is that you see is again, the manage the long-term financial health of the district. Averaged out to over 50% of the responses, people chose this in their top group of the 8 that they were able to recommend, and that's very much higher than the national average. So again, no surprise to you, you know what's going on here, but I think just some statistical validation of that. Positive professional climate is always a fairly high one, but even higher here. And what I thought was particularly interesting here was in the community member, 55%, that 50% is made up of 55% of the community, 40% in parents, but it's an issue to it was in the top group of 88% of the teachers. So on several of these items, I think you see a bit of a split between support staff and teachers and perhaps parents and community members on several areas. You see that again in number 4, the aligned budget long-range plans. Again, 47% for this district, almost double what it is across in their national sample. And a very big gap, 57% of the parents saw that as important, only 17% of the teachers saw that as important. Effectively recruit, employ, retain staff, not quite as variant in terms of the national population, but still somewhat there. For my mind, the rest of these were all relatively close to where the national sample was. The only other thing I would point out is on page 8, the item lead in an encouraging, participatory, and team-focused manner. There again, you saw 21% of the parents choosing this as one of their top 8 items, but 47% of the support staff and 48% of the teaching staff choosing this as an item. Those, at least in my mind, were some of the significant things that I saw in this survey based on my experience and the ones I've done in other districts. Before we go on to characteristics, I'll stop for a moment and see if there's any questions you have about the survey results. Okay, so the last page is the one that I'm hoping to get your feedback on, suggestions on, things to add or things to subtract. Again, we took our 5, we took the 5 areas that correlate to the research-based superintendent search that we had done, the literature search that we had done on superintendent skills, and then we added education and experience. And this really did not come up a lot on the survey, but I was extrapolated to some extent and need to find out if I guessed correctly in terms of what your wishes are. So basically, we took the survey items, we took the threads that we saw before, and tried to put them together with a couple of bullets that would hopefully be a way to measure candidates against the desired characteristics, what you needed now in this school district. Now, obviously, I need to say that if you found someone that was strong in all of these desired characteristics, they'd probably be sitting to the right hand of God. That person probably doesn't exist. But the reality is it gives us a guiding focus bit in terms of where we're going. And then at the bottom, it just seemed to me in a district like this one, the doctorate would be preferred and superintendent experience to be preferred. I'm very resistant to put either of these as required. I've had a couple of searches where boards have said, well, doctorate must be required or superintendent experience must be required. And then in the end, I said, can I bring you a candidate that doesn't have one of those? In a couple of instances, I've done that, and the board has been unanimous in loving that person. So in terms of having a doctorate or having superintendent experience, some people can overcome those issues. That's why I make it preferred as a screening device, but not an absolutely required device. But anyway, how did we do? Your time, your focus and comments. Happy to modify anything here that you'd like to modify.
Well, I really appreciate the work and the ability you have to synthesize literally pages and pages.
It's one of the, and thank you, it's one of the fastest ones we've ever done.
Yeah. Well, there's really good reading in these individual comments. And I think that, which I spent time reading this afternoon, and I think that there's good alignment between what I read in here and what you've come up with. I think clearly the issue is finance. It's managing a budget. It's finding a way to find a source of stable funding. It's living within the budget. It's, for some people, it is, as you said, how do we find additional funds to return us to the levels that we had before the defeat of the levy? I think the other theme that I see in this is a high regard for teachers all the way across the board. There seems to be really strong support for hiring and retaining.
Teachers and administrators. I would
Yeah,
say.
the best teachers. I think people look like they want this superintendent and extrapolating from that to the board to repair some of these relationships that have been damaged in the past little while. And I really think when you look through the parents' answers, that what they're really asking us all collectively to do is to do our jobs. So they don't have to worry about what's going on when their interests and passions lie in other directions. I thought it was really interesting to see the contrast. I mean, it was really clear what people want. As you mentioned, if you look at these, the overall results, certainly planning and managing the long-term financial health of the district was an outlier from national benchmarks. I think that aligning budgets, long-range plans, and operational mission or procedures with the district's vision, mission, and goals was an interesting outlier, because I think it probably reflects both the desire of the community to figure out our budget issues, but I think it also might indicate a certain softness on the part of our constituents and staff in terms of their commitment to the district's strategic goals and mission right now. And I thought it was kind of interesting, really, that unlike other districts, our folks overall scored 10% lower or voted 10% lower than the national average on encouraging a sense of shared responsibility among all stakeholders regarding success in student learning. And there was another outlier involving appropriate stakeholders in the decision-making process, again, softer than the national average. And even developing strong relationships with constituents, local government, area businesses, 6% lower than national average. And I really think what that means to me is they want the board to come together around a candidate who can do the job. And I think it's interesting that when we did this the last time we were searching for a superintendent, and I'm the only one here who was involved in that search, the words innovate and create and reinvent came very much to the top of the list of what people were looking for. In these results, I'm seeing that people really want certainly a person who can communicate a vision, but they want a skilled administrator who can identify problems and fix them and just get the work done. So I think, that this is extremely helpful. As you know, I have been doing my due diligence and thinking about the right leader. And it's interesting to me how things change over time and
Exactly.
what was the characteristics of what we believed 5 years ago may not, and certainly it appears that they are not the same drivers as those characteristics
Absolutely. I
that people are
think
looking for now.
I'm sorry. I think your comments are absolutely right on. That's why we say that all of these characteristics are important to be an effective superintendent. But it's at this school district at this moment in time. And obviously they do, that's what we're trying to get at here as it relates to that. I think the other thing is that I would hope you consider, whether you use us or not, I would hope you consider when you hire a new superintendent, you need to sit down, work out the evaluation issues, work out what your strategic goals are for short-term and long-term. And I hope you'll not forget about this, because I think this will give you a head start in terms of setting goals with your new superintendent.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think there's a lot of information here that we'll find very useful in many, many other ways.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I think your firm did a really terrific job, especially in the compressed time frame, and the response from the community has been outstanding. 749 is the total count, which is an outstanding response.
It is.
And collating it all in a short period of time, really very nice job, makes it easy to read. I think it is pretty clear that there is a lot of clarity on the part of the community with such large numbers focused on the money, that there is a lot of clarity that accountability for living within our budget is a key driver. It's certainly correct that there's some difference of opinion as to whether it's more money or spend what we have more effectively. And so we'll deal with that issue. What I also like about the outcome that you received from so many people is how well it aligns with the statement of purpose that we've already agreed to for the new superintendent. We start with, the first phrase is to create a culture of accountability, and accountability is important in all aspects. We focus mostly on accountability as it relates to academic outcomes, and yet accountability as it relates to the inputs that we approve toward getting those academic outcomes is equally important. How much money we approve in the budget to achieve the academic outcomes that the parents in this community clearly want and expect is going to be the challenge that we have to deal with. And I think that your survey made that very, very clear. So we'll deal with it.
Thank you.
Other thoughts?
Anything you want to change at this point, or is it okay? I mean, we hope the desired characteristics become a guiding light for you as you interview people and as you think about questions you might want to ask. Obviously, there's nothing locked in stone about it, but every once in a while we make a mistake in something or a term, etc. Or sometimes board members want to insert a word or take out a word or whatever. I just wanted to double check.
If this is what the survey found, then the words that came out of the survey are the words that should be used.
That's perfectly fine. That's happy for us. I will get a PDF back to you tomorrow and to the district. Most districts, and probably yours would too, put this on the website so that people that took the survey and whatever can see how their response is. I think obviously we owe it to them that took the time to do this, and lots of people took the time to do this. Anything else? Thank you.
No,
Thank you.
thank you.
Any further questions on the superintendent search process? On behalf of Debbie, on my behalf, I want to thank Debbie, who is ill tonight, for all the work that she's done. We were both out of the country on vacation, and yet this issue continues to drive what has to be done. And with the beauty of cell phones and the internet, it's available everywhere. So are we. It's all good.
Thank you very much. Okay, we have the first reading of a policy this evening regarding intra-district open enrollment.
Yes, thank you. Mr. Sawyers and I have worked to prepare for you a draft of a required policy. This is required under Ohio Revised Code and has come into effect with the opening of the new building. And that is, now that we have buildings where more than one grade level is housed in more than one facility, And these are not extensions of the facility. For instance, this policy was not needed when students were in trailers or were in the annex. But now that an entire facility is open that has its own IRN number and state report card, we are required to put this policy in place. Basically, I do want to draw your attention to the fact that the overriding desire of this policy and of the requirement here is that we balance capacity and enrollment. That will still be the responsibility of the administration to make sure that the facility is used, both 1.8 and 2.5 in the middle school are used to their optimum use, and that no one building becomes overcrowded because of this. So administrators will determine the criteria. There will be an application process. Those slots will be limited because, again, we are utilizing our space to its maximum degree with some flexibility. And we have yet to then put this into place because this would be an entirely new policy. But we've drafted also for your review, even though administrative guidelines are not voted on by the board nor created by the board, we did present to you, Mr. Sawyers and I, a draft of what those administrative guidelines could look like, and that's in your folder as well. So we forward to any questions you might have. We do need to move forward. As we learned of the deadline of this required policy, the district is required to have this policy in place by March 31st. We are not going to meet that deadline. But given your first reading is tonight, March 28th, we intend to bring it back to you for a vote on your work session, April 11th.
As with so many items, this again is a relatively perfunctory process because it's required by state law. So
That's right.
whatever comments we have are comments just to be comments. They won't have any bearing whatsoever on the outcome. Is that correct?
That is correct, unless there are nuances to the language that still fit within the requirement of the law. Those could be accommodated.
And just a question, this is relevant because we have buildings with the same grades. So if we have different configuration, past, present, or future, without overlapping grades, this wouldn't be relevant.
That is true, but I would say if it would be helpful to you, we could review for you the capacities of the buildings. Given enrollment growth, it is unlikely that you could create a scenario by which you would be using the buildings to their maximum capacity and not have some overlap.
What I understood from Paul's question was even if we enact this policy, the policy only applies when we have students from the same grade occupying different buildings. So if in the future, for example, we no longer have students from the same grade occupying different buildings, the policy is still there, but it doesn't matter.
It doesn't apply. That's correct.
Does that?
Are there, does the state law dictate any of the guidelines that are required?
No, the state law is in effect to ensure racial balance, and that if there is in fact opportunity for available capacity, that students and parents have the right to apply. So the provision in the law is broad.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And it is incumbent upon each of us, if we have additional questions or suggestions, we probably need to get those over to the superintendent prior to the next board meeting, while and where we will be requested to take action. So thank you. We've come to the public participation part of our agenda this evening, and we have no one who has elected to come and speak to us today. So that then takes us into the business portion of the meeting, the consent agenda items. The first items for action are the treasurer's items, and those items would be A1 and 2. May I have a motion for those items, please?
So moved.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, who seconded?
Mr. Newman.
Mr. Newman?
Ms. Jenkins?
I sent out an email explaining the two items, so if there are no additional questions beyond that, I have nothing further to add.
Any questions? Nope. Okay, could we have a roll call vote, please?
Mr. Darrow?
Yes.
Mr. Newman?
Yes.
Vice President
Yeah, me,
McClellan?
Yes.
President Kohler?
Yes.
You are not here.
And that then takes us to the superintendent's items for action, and those include both personnel items and others. And I would like a motion, please, to entertain items B1 through C4, please.
So moved.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you. Dr. Dominy?
I too sent information via email regarding several of these items, and they are standard business items, so I'm happy to take any questions. Again, this is an opportunity to recognize that tonight we are hiring our new athletic director, who is soon to be named the Colorado Athletic Director of the Year. And so he is not able to be with us this evening since he has flew here multiple times for his interview process. And we're happy to present him for hire this evening. I'm happy to take any questions.
Any questions? I was just going to point out and ask you to share a little bit about the motion to approve the student teaching agreement with The Ohio State University.
Okay. We have a standard and ongoing agreement with Ohio State to provide student teachers for both their final practicum student teaching. And as part of that agreement, we receive fee waivers for our teachers to participate in Ohio State coursework. And that's a strong and ongoing relationship. Ohio State's not the only university that we have agreements with. And student teachers provide a great resource, and we are happy to give back and invest in the profession. You could argue that there is no better place for a pre-service teacher to have the opportunity to learn under the mentorship of a New Albany teacher. So that's a great opportunity for Ohio State students.
Thank you. Yeah, I like the fact that it's truly mutually beneficial. So
Yes.
it's important. And then I also wanted to point out once again the generosity of our donors, and in particular, those people who honored the memory of Linda Martin through substantial donations to the library fund. So we're certainly grateful both to Linda for all that she did while she was here, and also to those people who chose to honor her life in that way. So
The board will likely see more of those. These are what we received as of the cutoff for this agenda, so you're likely to see more on future agendas.
that's very nice. Thank you. If there are no other questions or comments, could we have a roll call, please?
Vice President McClellan?
Yes.
Mr. Darrow?
Yes.
Mr. Newmoff?
Yes.
President Kohler?
Yes, and that motion carries. We have one more opportunity for public participation. Has anyone changed their mind about speaking this evening? Okay, well, then the board intends to go into executive session tonight as permitted by section 121.22G4 of the Ohio Revised Code for the purpose of considering the appointment, employment, promotion, or compensation of a public employee. May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr.
Second.
Devereux. Thank you, Mr. Newmoff. And could we have a vote, please?
Mr. Darrow,
Yes.
Mr. Newmoff,
Yes.
Vice President McClellan,
Yes.
President Fuller.
Yes, that motion carries. We do not anticipate any action as a result of the executive session this evening. Thank you very much for coming. I don't know.
We have the conference room next to John's office.